Always great to have Ryan Cristiàn here from The Last American Vagabond. He's a vagabond for other reasons than what we're going to talk about today, but we won't get into that. We won't get into that. No, I'm just kidding, Ryan. It's always good to see you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the fact that you're still off of Twitter, even though everybody is fighting on one side or the other of this sort of like Wild West free speech theater. I think it kind of is like it seems like there's these two loudest perspectives where one is like it's going to be amazing, the floodgates are going to open, it's going to be so great, everybody's going to be able to talk freely again. And then there are the people reacting to that who don't like that, who are like, this is going to be terrible. Like Taylor Lorenz just wrote an article for the Washington Post talking about how it's going to open the floodgates of hell. It's very dangerous. Apple and Google should deplatform Twitter from the apps. And so they're freaking out. And then there's kind of like this third category, maybe multiple categories within the third category, which is sort of watching and thinking, I don't know if either one of these are really getting it right. But anyway, so you're still banned, and you have kind of a weird story because you were banned originally for medical misinformation, right? And now you're, after reapplying, you are apparently harassing and bullying people. So let's talk about it. What happened?
Well, I mean, first I would put the caveat out there that, this week was when this was supposed to happen, right? And even though I've been denied in this appeal during the process, who knows? It could happen tomorrow where my account comes back. I know, like Richie Allen, for example, they just got his account back the other day and he didn't even ask for it. So that being said, not to say that I know for sure I'm not part of this new process, but I put this out as an appeal, a new process, because that we were told, right, to put the appeal out because he's letting people back on. And when this account, the original one, TLA Vagabond, was my original account, something like 30, 40,000 subscribers. I forget what it was at, and was deleted for COVID medical misinformation, which we now know he has even removed that policy from Twitter at this point. And that's what it said. It said medical misinformation. And I'm like 95% sure it was myocarditis and whether the injections, having an objective conversation at that time using science about whether it was possible it could cause it. We all know that's true by now, right? Now, I only say 99.5% because there's been about 5 counts in between that were different versions of medical misinformation at different points. Any of them were medical misinformation, as I remember showing on the show and everybody saw themselves, right? So now, after the appeal process, I put back, and the one, it says it at the top. The screenshot was from November 22nd, just so that's clear that I have the tweet we can show as well if you want to show that. And so appeal process, it got right back, and as you can see, it says no. And it says, we found your account violating terms of service, specifically hateful conduct, which is one thing, right? And this overlaps with this weird hate speech kind of discussion today. But first of all, if I was censored for medical misinformation and the account was suspended, how exactly did I somehow commit medical or hateful conduct on an account that wasn't being used in this middle process? Or that they shifted their argument. So it says underneath that as well, rules to promote violence against or directly attack, threaten other people. My point is, I mean, of all people, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I actively, daily advocate nonviolence. I go out of my way to not be, I feel like I attack or harass or do any of that stuff. And I don't, right? And yet this is what they're leveling at me. And so I just find this very, very odd. And this process where people are being let back on, this amnesty conversation, and I get dismissed for that during this process for a different reason that I was first censored for. I mean, you guys tell me. I mean, that seems very, very disconcerting. Now, I wasn't too hopeful about this when it started, but I'm still hoping that maybe I'm wrong and that maybe he will come through with this. But to your point in the beginning, it's almost juvenile to watch this argument where either he's a freedom speech, fighting for free speech, or he's the devil. And as always, the two-party paradigm misses the mark when it's usually somewhere in between. And I think that is sort of an illusion because, first of all, how do we know that is what he's doing? Like, really, how are we going to respect somebody like Fox News, kind of across the board, Tucker? They're all saying Elon's fighting for free speech. How are you going to pretend to know that as a journalist? Did he sign an affidavit? Do you know him personally? Did you speak on the phone? It's like, we don't know that, but yet they're all taking their lines. So that's where I want to start. Sorry, I could talk for an hour. I just got off my show. So
what people are commenting about how you've been on 3 shows today and you're a very busy guy. You still have a lot to add. No, I appreciate the energy also because everybody who watches my show knows that I've got 2 kids, and at any point in time, I may have to bail from the show and have you host it. So it's always good to have somebody who can carry on a conversation with a wall, just like I could. So, okay, let's talk real fast about this Amnesty deal? Because this happens allegedly next week. It's supposed to start, right?
No, as I understand it, it's supposed to be this week. It was supposed to start
this
Monday
week.
and be this week, unless I'm mistaken on
Okay.
that.
Okay.
That was
All
that
right.
was why the process was begun and why I decided to, the whole thing.
I see. Okay, gotcha. So it's Thursday, and there's one day left in the week. So I don't know. You're right. It's not necessarily hopeful. And you make a very good point. How could you have engaged in different activity while you were banned?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they would say, "Well, we went back in time and we saw what you were doing, and you were also bullying people, and so you shouldn't be doing that."
But
The weird thing about
that's the point.
right, yeah,
For sure
well,
wasn't. I mean, people know me.
No, and totally. I mean, but see, that's the problem with the whole bullying and harassment or hate speech phenomenon, because it's just such a wide variety of interpretation there. And
Yeah.
you and I kind of were wondering if, since Twitter dropped its COVID misinformation policy, which everybody was cheering, and then you had your reason switched to bullying or harassment, inciting violence, whatever, could it be possible that you would have been let back in given the misinformation policy dropping? And so this was, I mean, it's like, why would they care about Ryan that much? They'd be like, oh, how can we get Ryan? We have to,
right.
like, I don't want to read intention into it, but it just, you would have come back in if they had left it the same, probably, if it had just been the misinformation issue.
Based on what was stated, if that was what was going to happen, then yes, I would agree. But I mean, right now we can see that even people that are supporting, essentially kind of to a degree, that Elon is doing this for the right reasons, are commenting on this going, well, we've only seen like 5 or 6 people come back on. Like, clearly this hasn't amounted to everybody votes for amnesty and the people get what they want, which is how he framed it. That's literally what he said. People have spoken, is what he said. So now it translates over the last week to, I mean, where are all the doctors? I mean, look, I don't even want to make this about me. My point was, it's clear that something weird is happening here. And, sure, let's just pretend it's some rogue Twitter employee that will be gone tomorrow. That's how this nebulous thing is going. It is, when they want it to be, it's some other person. When it's not, it's whatever they want it to be. But where are all the doctors? Where's Dr. Peter McCullough? Where are all these people that were very clearly censored for ridiculous reasons, whether they were right or wrong? Understand, they're a doctor with credentials that have a right to speak on these topics. And then we can even get into free speech and make it clear that they have a right to be wrong, even if they mean to be wrong. That's actual free speech, right? The problem is that this isn't actually what's happening. And so now I'm at a point where I'm left to question whether this is some kind of malicious act. And I find it to be very, to your point, again, I don't know for sure. I can't speak to like everybody else would love to do in the media and a lot of the people about Elon, that I know what he thinks, but I don't know whether this is an act, a ploy, a manipulation, but I do know that it's dishonest to switch the reasoning, right? Or even like to go back and argue something else, even though it's clear that I'm not doing that at a time when they're casually shifting away from the medical misinformation point. And everywhere you look right now, as my show was just talking about, seems to be the new focus, right? Hate speech, involuntary commitment for people that are a danger to themselves. And all of these things, as we've seen over the COVID-19 illusion, overlap with this agenda. Right? Well, you're a danger to yourself because you're sharing words that make people not take vaccines, or you're saying hate speech words that cause racist attacks, right? And that's not what's actually happening, but that's how they frame these things. So it's the same narrative. So am I just being kicked down the road? And if that's the case, why me? Like, I'm not trying to make it about like I do the best work and that's why I'm not being censored. I'm actually pretty baffled. I tend to think it's because I'm objective. I try to be, and nonpartisan. That's what I genuinely think this comes down to, is the nonpartisan aspect. I generally point to people like James Corbett, one of the most cited people, long time research. And I swear every single person in this field knows of James Corbett and knows his amazing work and doesn't realize it or not, references it half the time, but nobody has him on their shows, like in the kind of like quasi mainstream sphere. And I think it's because he's aggressively nonpartisan. And all of this is part of a theater, I think, ultimately, to some degree.
So he's written this a couple times in response, I think, to people who've asked about Alex Jones and why Alex Jones isn't getting reinstated. At least I've seen him write back to Viva, and then this looks like he's replying to other people, Sam Harris, Kim.com, and he writes, "My firstborn child died in my arms. I felt his last heartbeat. I have no mercy for anyone who would use the deaths of children for gain, politics, or fame." And I don't know, did you see Brooke Jackson's reply?
Yes, I loved that. I actually shared that because that's exactly
Go ahead, read it.
Well, again, it said then
Do you see
why?
it?
That's right. Well, yeah, I remember now. Why do the FDA and the CDC still have their accounts? And remember, for those who don't know, Brooke Jackson is the whistleblower who very clearly exposed. I mean, go back to the very first interview, which was with me, where we displayed all the information, and you can prove it all the way back then that these people in their trials knowingly covered things up and knowingly allowed bad things to happen. And that's a very nice way to put that in a small way. But the point is, they are responsible for children dying. And that's undeniable at this point, but that's hard for some people to, absorb if they don't see the data yet. But the real point for me is, I mean, and people know I'm not one to defend Alex Jones. I don't really, there's plenty of things that I don't even want to get into it. The point is that Alex Jones has a right to say whatever he wants to say, right? Whether it's tactless, whether it is insulting, whether it is, there's no decorum. The point is, he didn't even do the stuff that they're. I mean, did he use children's death to, get into like where I'm defending him? But ultimately, he covered the story, right? And just because on a platform you are also, hawking pills and whatever else, the argument they're trying to make is that he used the deaths of the children to make money. And so the media covering any number of other horrible things as the mainstream media, and then hawking pharmaceutical pills. How is that any different? You see my point? I mean, it's subjective, and that's every part we're seeing today.
Viva wrote back, experience does not always make us smarter. Sometimes it just traumatizes us. Your tragic life experience is something few people will ever know, and no one should ever know. Free speech policy cannot be crafted off personal trauma.
Right.
Sincerely, genuinely submitted. God bless. But it's, this is, I would say, like this thread. I mean, it's really interesting. People want to go through and read it because Alex was one of the first people who got booted from YouTube. And I remember some people caring, a lot of people not caring. And back then, he was booted not for misinformation, but for hate speech, for what you're getting tagged at right now. And I remember I look back at that a few months ago when we were talking about the coverage of his trial and what the platforms are doing now, and how the corporate news has been covering him in the last few months. And if you go back in time, now they're talking about misinformation and whatnot. Back then, if you look at a lot of the write-ups, like from the tech companies being quoted as to why he was deplatformed, it was because of hate speech. And so I thought they were moving from the hate speech phenomenon to, because they were saying back then, no, we like diverse ideas. We're all about debate. We want people to be able to debate topics. We just don't like hate speech. And this guy was doing hate speech. And now we've seen it. It's evolved into exactly what they said it wasn't going to be, which was, diversity of thought. Like now we don't want diversity of thought. But back then we were saying we were just getting rid of mean people. We would never get rid of people for just have differing opinions. Now, of course, we've evolved to differing opinions get deplatformed too for any number of reasons. So, I thought it was interesting given yours, which is like the opposite. Like you were originally, it was having a different idea about something. And now it's the whole like hate speech deal. Yeah. Just kind of inverse.
Well, but it is, but it's not, I don't see it as inverse. I see it as this is the natural progression. So yeah, I agree. Before the COVID era, it was, what's medical misinformation at that point? I mean, that was still happening. People, I mean, actually, interestingly enough, if you look back at the time frame, you can see a lot of people in like Facebook Facebook groups. A lot of them like keto focused, right? Where they're like just offering up different diets and being censored for it. I mean, it was crazy at the time. I remember seeing that, going like, really, about keto or about certain kind of like, I don't know, just basically diets and health focus, which is very telling, right? With where we ended up. But so then it became, and that was just misinformation and so on, but mostly hate speech, right? Then we go into COVID-19 fantasy land, and all of a sudden it becomes medical misinformation. Exactly to your point, doctors with the right to speak on it and using peer-reviewed science were being censored because they went afoul of the allowed narrative. But what I'm seeing today is not just a shift back into hate speech, but we've seen this narrative being set. While we were in the medical misinformation land, they've been setting the narrative that, well, if you say these words, it's no longer just it's violence. One of these representatives for Congress just said, well, sticks and stones actually, these days words can break your bones. Like, just really ridiculous. And shifting into this, we see the MAGA overlap, right? The vanilla ISIS psyop, I call it, where they're trying to frame these people as being white supremacy and terrorism and domestic terrorists. And Biden's executive order mentions both them and medical misinformation using the word domestic terrorist, right? Now we're seeing this shift away. Elon removes the COVID medical misinformation category, but yet people are being, now my thing switches to hate speech. We see Germany arresting people, 91 people interrogating people over the last week for hate speech. We see a guy in Louisiana arrested for a joke about COVID-19 under anti-terrorism laws, right? Why wouldn't they have called it medical misinformation? Right? There's obviously some kind of a coordinated shift, and hate speech discussion is everywhere right now. And I don't think it's just hate speech. I think it's about creating the next step where you are a criminal if you say the wrong thing, not just that you're, in misinforming people and causing people to die. It is now that we can arrest you based on that. And I think it's just kind of a lump together. Just my opinion. Yeah, I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves on where I see it going,
Oh, I'm really glad you brought up tea leaves.
Just because it's racist? Apparently it is to some people, right?
Oh, no, because it goes really well
I'm just kidding.
with wine grapes and coffee beans, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Don't forget, everybody, the holidays are quickly approaching. I know we're past Thanksgiving, and maybe you had grandma over. You guys disagree on pretty much everything, but you could agree on some great wine. And that's why you should go to AllisonWinePromo.com and get 50% off my favorite Malbecs from Argentina, 50% off shipping. These all come from pretty small operations. You can't get them at a grocery store. If you're already a wine drinker, you've got no excuse. Go to AllisonWinePromo.com, support my work, keep interviews like Ryan coming on, and check out for sure in the pairing. You got to check out the Tordos, the Rogue Malbec. Not only is it named the Rogue Malbec after everybody who comes on the show, but it's also just very good. They handpick the grapes. It's one of my favorite bottles of wine ever. So again, AllisonWinePromo.com. However, if you want to do coffee, you can do stocking stuffers. They make little travel packs, which are great. You get 10% off your first order. This is twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. These are organic coffees, high altitude. Again, from Nicaragua. They have light roast, they have dark roast, they've got leather works even from local artisans, and they have tea, Katura tea, which is tea you make from the coffee fruit. I'm a big espresso drinker because I just got an espresso machine for my parents for Christmas. Italian made, all stainless steel, not made in China with aluminum. So I'm very excited about that. So if you like espresso, you can do that too. Okay, Ryan, I want to take some, I forgot to say this. Go over to questions, AllisonMar.locals.com, and you can put in for my questions that I pose ahead of time. You can put in questions for people like Ryan or anybody else who comes on. It's $5 a month to support my work, and one of the best ways to do it. We got some questions that I want to ask you. A few of them I think we'll do on YouTube, but I think the rest we'll probably do off of YouTube. So why don't I ask, for the first one I think gives a sort of a counter to the Elon hate. So Tom asks, Elon took ownership of Twitter on 10/27/22, but didn't gain control until after the layoffs on 11/4. Since then, he has reinstated Trump and Ye, removed child sex trafficking hashtags, ended COVID-19 misinformation policy, made Twitter faster, all-time high active users, rolled back failed $8 verified accounts. Elon promised general amnesty on 11/24/22. So which of the above would you have delayed so that your account suspension could be fixed sooner?
Well, that's not a very clearly leaning question. Like, the whole premise of that is that I'm selfish, I guess, but
complaining.
Yeah, well, but did we not just very clearly go over that? Right. This is my point about this kind of conversation. This guy has already made his mind up. He already has his opinion. He's right. I'm wrong. Elon's saving the world. Right. I mean, I'm guessing, just to be clear, but the real point here is, what did I just say? What were we just talking about? I don't know what's happening. And I truly hope that Elon is doing what he says he's doing. How can you respond? Well, to be fair, he wrote that before this was going live, right? So take that back. But the point here, guys, to reiterate, I'm not saying he's done this or done that. The point is, I don't know, and neither does the person posting that question, right? Go back. Well, you have to bring it up. But the point is, all these things he's listing off, how many of those do we know for sure, right? How do we know Twitter's faster? Well, I mean, you could pretend that you feel it's faster. I use it every day. I don't think it's any faster. It's because that's what Elon said, right? All-time active users. Well, how do we know that? Because that's what Elon said. My point is, why are we at a point where we are taking this person at face value? I would say the same thing about Jack, the same thing about anybody on any side. But people tend to take these points as partisan points because they feel that's the way it is. So when I say Elon's not doing this, they think I'm attacking the right or Elon or however they perceive it. And I'm not saying this person, I don't know. I'm saying in a general sense, right? So I posted something today. The tweet he put out was, we're deleting a lot of these spam and bots and so on. So your followers are probably going to be dropped. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. I just simply captioned it. And I said, well, it's interesting that when this was said before Elon took over, everybody screamed censorship. And rightly so. But even when we didn't know for sure, right? We didn't know. There's no accountability then. There doesn't seem to be right now. Not to say he won't do it soon, but we said censorship. And now he says that and they go, yay, get rid of the bots. So how come we can't see that point right there, right? We don't know for sure what he's doing. He's saying that. Now, I am hoping that he's being honest. I really am. But at the end of the day, it's the same situation. And people, like people are losing followers, and we're assuming they're bots, whereas before we assumed that they weren't, because you see my point? And all I'm saying is none of us know. I don't know, and neither do you. And I think it's interesting that we're assuming from a partisan angle, which just like you made clear before, it's either the end of the world or it's all free speech. And I really don't think we know that yet.
I think it's totally fair. Yeah, it's fair to ask questions and to say, we don't know, and to, assume. Well, I mean, you don't even have to assume. Just be skeptical enough to say, like, everybody's got something like that. That's their reason, and we don't know if Elon's reason ultimately is to make a lot more money or to do whatever. I mean, everybody's got their guesses on, the brain chip and all these other, or maybe you want to assume the best, that he really does want to make this the town square, and he is going to,
or it's both.
We just got to wait and see. We don't know. We just got to wait and see.
Or it's both though, right? This
it could be both. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It could be both.
Yeah. Tweets out that said that the whole point of this was about app X or whatever he called it. I just showed on my show tonight, right? So he's saying it's about creating like a WeChat equivalent, and you may not think that's concerning. I kind of tend to think it's a focal point, a digital ID kind of pipeline. That's how I perceive it. Who knows if he wants that, if he believes that, if he cares, but it doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive. He can try to bring back free speech while also rapidly driving us in the Great Reset direction. You know what I mean? Like it's very concerning.
Yeah, I think it's fair. But, well, Use Your Mind says, we don't know. We're looking for a hero anyway. We can get one at this point. I mean, there probably is a little bit to the
wishful thinking,
just the craziness that people have witnessed over the last few years. And yeah, it does. I think, it does set us up. Well, as you talk about many times on your show, which is one of the great reasons I think people, whether there's stuff that they disagree with you on sometimes or agree with you on a lot of stuff, it doesn't matter. I think you give a good perspective to challenge if you're willing to be challenged in your corner. Right. I think you do a good job of holding, multiple sides to task, and I don't find you to be like hero worshiping really anyone. So, and it's just important to at least hear voices like yours. If you're interested in at least, even if it's just sharpening your own argument, in your own position, but reality is often more complex than we're given the chance to think through when we're reading stuff on social media or in the corporate press or whatever. And you're right. It could be both. So, think through that, what the consequences of that are. Okay. I hear my baby crying, so I'm going to run and get him, but I'm going to throw this question at you. Okay. Why do they need a list like that from your screenshot, from the email you got about why you're banned still? Promoting violence against another individual is illegal. So according to this list, if you were to call for the maiming of all people who choose to grow unusually long fingernails, would that be okay on Twitter? And it is kind of weird they added disease. Did you see that too? Exactly. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you want, scroll up so I can read the next one just in case you take a little bit. But
disease is now a hate crime. Oh, that's about that. You can't hate people who are diseased. So much for the movie Pandemic. Can't tweet about not liking it, I suppose. After all, there are very nice people on both sides in that movie. So
nice.
Yeah, okay, I'll mute myself and leave you with those two questions.
Okay. Well, the first part, is that ultimately, if I'm trying to remember now that you read the second one, that that they're, it's illegal. It's kind of the point I make about the lynching point, that they pass a law about not lynching people. And my point is, well, okay, there's already a law against violence. There's a law against harassment. There's a law against every single part of that. Why was it necessary to make a specific law about the one thing? Politics. And that's all it really comes down to. And the list on this is interesting, right? Is that ultimately you're listing off all these different categories, and all you really have to do is just make, if you break the law. The point is I think the question is, if you list it off like this, it opens the door to all these different subjective things that you can apply it to. That's my personal perspective, right? That I think we've all seen that's how it's been used and abused. But to the second one, it says disease is now a hate crime. You can't hate people who are diseased. Oh, based on the listing. And I think it's obviously about creating a situation. Well, what's even interesting, that where my mind jumps to be quite honest, that they're all getting ahead of the reality of all these people that are sickly and ill and suffering because of the injections that they continue to take. And now you can't, because it's interesting that we're forced to reveal our vaccination status, or hopefully lack thereof, to go into a restaurant, but God forbid you ask if somebody just died was vaccinated. Like, people make that comment on Twitter all the time, but how do you not see that obvious contradiction? You know, it's clear.
I think that's a great topic to carry on onto the other platforms off of YouTube. Bye, everybody on YouTube. It was great to see you. See you over live on Rumble and ROKFIN. Take care.